I was 5 years old when the Whitman family adopted me. 10 years later, they found out that on the day they brought me home, their real missing daughter had been at the orphanage too. They had simply chosen me. The person who should have died in the real daughter's place was me. After that, they were full of regret, full of hatred. They wished I had never appeared in their lives at all. Again and again, when I was framed and humiliated, Ethan Whitman stood by and did nothing. Smile, he would say. You love smiling, don't you? If you hadn't smiled at me with that disgusting face back then, I would have chosen Lily Sunny Whitman. You killed Lily. You did. When he found out I was pregnant with his child, he forced me onto the operating table. That time I died with the baby. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day the Whitmans came to the orphanage. Honey, what are you doing hiding up here? Miss Carter hurriedly carried me down from the rooftop. Miss Carter, I don't want to go. She patted the back of my hand gently. Silly girl, the richest family in the state is coming today. If they choose you, you'll never have to worry about food or clothes again. When you meet them later, remember to smile. Okay? My heart clenched. I remembered how in my last life, Ethan had demanded that I smile. No matter what happened when people falsely accused me of stealing, he told me to smile. When filthy rumors were spread about me, he told me to smile. Even when he found out I was pregnant with his child, he only went silent for a moment. Then he still told me to smile. To smile while I got rid of the baby. I pressed my lips together. The luxury car finally stopped outside. I slipped into the storage room. In this life, I would absolutely have nothing to do with the Whitman family again. I did not know how long I stayed there. Eventually, I fell asleep. When they found me, I heard that the Whitmans had failed to adopt anyone that day. I did not know why, but I did not care. That night, I lay in bed and looked at the 30-something girls sleeping in the dorm room. I did not know which one was the Whitmans' real daughter. According to what the Whitmans had said in my previous life, their real daughter was here. Now, I did not want too much contact with that family. But in the first 10 years after they adopted me, in my last life, Mr. Whitman, Mrs. Whitman and Ethan had truly been very good to me. I thought if in this life their real daughter could return to them, then maybe I could repay the kindness they once gave me. Before I could do anything, the Whitmans came to the orphanage a second time. This time, every little girl around 5 or 6 years old was asked to have blood drawn. That had never happened in my previous life. After my blood was taken, I came out and saw Ethan walking toward me. His face was cold. My heart suddenly stirred. I had heard that this blood test had been requested by the young Mr. Whitman himself. Ethan have been reborn too. I lowered my head and moved aside. A pair of expensive sneakers paused in front of me for a moment. Then he walked away. The next day, I noticed one of my roommates was gone. In my memory, that little girl did not like to talk. He cried all the time, a tiny crybaby. I had not expected that crybaby to be the Whitmans' real daughter. The peaceful days did not last long. The Whitmans came again. This time, they said they wanted to adopt another girl, to keep their daughter company. And this time I could not hide. All of us, including me, stood in a row waiting for the Whitmans to choose. First person to get out of the car was the Whitmans' daughter. The little crybaby who used to sob over everything had already become a protected little princess. Ethan carried her the whole way. Only when he reached us did he put her down. Lily. Many children rushed toward Lily, their eyes filled with surprise. We were all young, but none of us were stupid. Everyone knew that if they could leave with Lily today, they might get to wear beautiful dresses too. They might live in a big house. They might have people serving them. Everyone looked at Lily with eager eyes. But for some reason, Lily stopped in front of me. My heart tightened. My hand moved faster than my thoughts. I shoved Lily to the ground. Lily Sunny Lily. That day Mrs. Harris, the orphanage director, punished me by making me stand facing the wall for 3 hours. I thought that after I pushed Lily, the Whitmans would never adopt me. But 3 days later, I was still sitting in the Whitmans' luxury car. Mrs. Harris told me that the Whitmans had adopted me. All the paperwork had already been completed. I felt as if I had been struck by lightning. But it was already decided. I could only accept it. Luckily, Lily was easy to get along with Mr. and Mrs. Whit, and treated me with the same care they had given me. During the first 10 years of my previous life, the coldest person in the house was Ethan. He almost never spoke to me, but sometimes I would catch him looking at me in silence. A few days later, after dinner, I heard Ethan speaking to his parents. Dad, why don't we install central heating at the orphanage? I stiffened and lowered my head. Actually, I had been hesitating for days too. I've been trying to figure out how to help the orphanage, avoid the tragedy from my previous life. In that life, the orphanage caught fire because of an old electric blanket. The orphanage never had enough money. One electric blanket could be used for 10 years. Of course, Mr. Whitman said that was careless of me. Took care of Lily for years. We should do something this time. The Whitmans not only installed proper heating in the orphanage, they also donated $10 million. I had racked my brain and still failed to think of a solution. Ethan solved it with a single sentence. I still avoided him, but honestly, I was grateful to him. Putting aside everything that had happened between us. In our previous life, Ethan's rebirth really had changed the fate of many unfortunate people. In the blink of an eye, Lily and I were old enough for high school. Over the years, my life in the Whitman house was calm and comfortable. After Lily was found, the Whitmans' business grew, even larger than it had in my previous life. Ethan was still in college, but he had already begun interning at the company. Over the years, I still had very little contact with him, partly because I deliberately avoided him, partly because he was always cold toward me. The way he treated me was completely different from the way he doted on Lily, Mr. and Mrs. Whitman, and even Lily often felt embarrassed about it, especially Lily. She had been a crybaby since she was little, and I knew very well why the Whitmans had adopted me. They wanted someone to take good care of Lily. So over the years, aside from studying, my whole life revolved around Lily. No matter what happened, I always put Lily first. Lily depended on me too. So when everyone heard that I wanted to attend Central High, a tough public magnet school, Mr. and Mrs. Whitman and even Ethan looked at me in surprise. "Sunny, why do you suddenly want to go to Central?" "Exactly. Your grades are excellent. But with a family like ours, you really don't need to work that hard." Lily nodded again and again, tears in her eyes. I unconsciously clenched my hands. Yes, children born into families like the Whitmans did not need to walk the hardest road. Their lives have been planned out early, private school, then college overseas. Especially with Ethan being so outstanding. As long as Lily and I behaved, we could live comfortably for the rest of our lives. But I did not want that in this life. I wanted to live the life I chose for myself. So for the first time, the obedient me became stubborn. Everyone in the Whitman family took turns trying to persuade me. I still did not agree. I did not expect Ethan to be the one to help me. He said, "Let her." Just 2 words. And I successfully entered the best public high school in the city. Central High was exactly what I wanted. Loud, unforgiving, and completely indifferent to the Whitman name. The hallway smelled of cheap floor wax and teenage sweat, a stark contrast to the imported cedar and lavender scent of the Whitman estate. Here no one cared if I was an adopted orphan or a billionaire's charity case. I was just Sunny, the quiet girl in the back of AP Calculus. For the first 2 years, my routine was relentless. I woke up at 5, took the public bus across the city, and immersed myself in textbooks, coding clubs, and the erratic stock market. I used the generous monthly allowance Mr. Whitman deposited into my account, money I hadn't touched for clothes or luxuries, to quietly buy domain names and invest in early-stage tech startups I remembered from my previous life. I was building a fortress made of capital, completely separate from the Whitman empire. Lily remained at her elite private academy. She would often wait for me by the front gates of our estate, her designer uniform crisp, holding a plate of pastries the chef had made. "Sunny, you look so tired," she would pout, linking her arm through mine the moment I stepped off the pavement. "Why do you insist on riding that awful bus? Ethan said he could assign a driver for you." "I like the bus, Lily. It gives me time to read," I'd reply, offering her a genuine smile. I didn't hate Lily. How could I? She was just a girl who had been stolen from her family, and in this life, she was innocent, sweet, and fiercely loyal to me. When the high society girls mocked me at banquets for being the fake daughter, Lily was the first to throw a glass of juice on their custom dresses. But Ethan was a different story. He was 21 now, officially holding the title of vice president at Whitman Corp. We lived under the same roof, but we moved like 2 ships in a dense fog, carefully navigating around each other. We only spoke when necessary, usually polite, clipped sentences at the dinner table. Yet I felt his eyes on me. When I stayed up until 2 a.m. debugging software for a freelance gig, a glass of warm milk would miraculously appear outside my door. When a group of seniors at Central High tried to corner me in an alley to steal my laptop, they vanished from the school the very next day, expelled for undisclosed disciplinary reasons. I knew it was Ethan. I just didn't know why. If he hated me in the last life for taking his sister's place, why did he protect me in this one? If he knew the truth of our past, why didn't he drive me out? I didn't let myself dwell on it. Hope was a dangerous, heavy thing, and I had died under its weight once before. It was during my junior year that I met Julian. Julian Thorne sat next to me in AP Physics. He had perpetually messy black hair, ink-stained fingers, and a mind that moved faster than light. He was a scholarship kid, living in a cramped apartment above a mechanic's shop. He was Also the only person who figured out I was day trading in the middle of Mr. Harrison's lectures. Shorting a biotech firm before FDA approval? Julian whispered one rainy Tuesday, leaning over to look at my screen. Bold. Or stupid. They falsified their clinical trial data, I whispered back, not taking my eyes off the dropping red line. It's going to hit the press in 20 minutes. Julian scoffed. If you're right, I'll buy you coffee for a month. If you're wrong, you do my physics labs. 20 minutes later, the news broke. The stock tanked. I made $60,000 in 3 seconds. Julian stared at my screen, then at me. Who the hell are you, Sunny? Someone who likes her coffee black, I replied, shutting the laptop. Julian became my anchor outside the Whitman walls. We were too heavily guarded. People who recognized the same survival instinct in each other. We started partnering on small tech ventures, combining my capital and market foresight with his brilliant coding skills. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, I was actually happy. I was building something of my own. The peace shattered on a freezing November evening during my senior year. I was at the library with Julian, reviewing a contract for our newly formed LLC, when my phone vibrated. It was Lily Sunny. Her voice was trembling, barely a whisper over the sound of a rushing engine. Sunny, I'm scared. I shot up from my chair, my blood turning to ice. Lily, where are you? I don't know. A man picked me up from school. He said Ethan sent him because of an emergency, but we've been driving for an hour, and we're in the woods. Won't let me out. A sharp crack sounded over the line, followed by Lily's scream, and then dead air. My heart slammed against my ribs. In my previous life, Lily had never been found this early, but I remembered Ethan's furious, grief-stricken face from my past. Life screaming at me, you killed Lily. You did. In that timeline, Lily had died shortly after being found at age 15. I had been blamed for it, framed by someone. She's 15 now, I realized with a wave of nausea. The timeline was trying to correct itself. I pulled up the family tracking app on my phone. Lily's that was pinging off a cell tower near the old industrial shipyards on the edge of the city. Julian, I need your car. Now. I'm driving, Julian said instantly, seeing the look on my face. He grabbed his keys, and we bolted out of the library. As Julian sped through the slick, rain-soaked streets, my fingers flew across my phone screen dialing Ethan. He answered on the first ring. Where are you? Ethan's voice was ragged, completely stripped of its usual icy control. Did they take you too? I'm safe. But they have Lily, I said. She's at the old Northside shipyards. I'm heading there now. Sunny, do not go near there. Ethan roared over the phone, the sound of his own engine roaring in the background. Turn around. The Vickers family orchestrated this. They have armed men. Sunny, I swear to God, if you step out of that car, I'll stall them, I interrupted. Just hurry. I hung up. Julian parked a block away from the rusted shipping containers. The rain was coming down in sheets. I slipped out of the car, ignoring Julian's hissed warnings, and crept through the shadows of the shipyard. I spotted a black SUV parked between 2 towering containers. A man in a dark coat was dragging Lily out of the back seat. She was crying, fighting against his grip. Another man stood nearby, smoking a cigarette, holding a steel pipe. I didn't have a weapon. I didn't have a plan. But I was not going to let Lily die again. I grabbed a heavy wrench off the ground, abandoned by some dock worker, and stepped out from the shadows. Let her go, I said, my voice cutting through the rain. The 2 men turned. The smoker chuckled. Well, look what we have here. Another little rich girl. Sunny, run. Lily screamed. I called the police. They're 2 minutes away. I lied, gripping the wrench so tightly my knuckles turned white. Drop her, or you're spending the rest of your lives in a federal cell. The man holding Lily hesitated, glancing at his partner. But the smoker just flicked his cigarette away. Grab her too. The boss will pay double for both Whitman girls. He lunged at me. I swung the wrench with everything I had, catching him hard in the jaw. He went down with a grunt, but the sheer momentum threw me off balance. Before I could recover, the second man shoved Lily aside and grabbed my hair, yanking my head back. I tasted copper as his fist clipped my cheekbone. Sunny, Lily shrieked. The man raised the steel pipe. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the impact. It never came. A sickening crunch echoed through the rain. The grip on my hair vanished. I opened my eyes to see Ethan. He was a demon unleashed. He had tackled the man to the concrete, his fists raining down with brutal, merciless precision. Blood splattered across Ethan's white dress shirt, mixing with the rain. Ethan, stop. Lily cried, covering her eyes. You're going to kill him. Ethan didn't stop until the man was completely unconscious. He stood up slowly, his chest heaving, rain plastering his dark hair to his forehead. He looked at the two bodies on the ground, then turned to Lily, ensuring she was unharmed. Finally, his eyes locked onto me. He crossed the distance between us in 2 strides. Before I could process what was happening, he grabbed my shoulders and pulled me into a crushing embrace. He was trembling. The cold, untouchable Ethan Whitman was shaking like a leaf against me. "You idiot," he choked out, burying his face in my wet hair. "You absolute, reckless idiot. I told you to stay away. Why didn't you stay away?" "I had to save her," I whispered, my arms pinned awkwardly at my sides. "I wouldn't let her die." Ethan pulled back, his hands gripping my face, his thumbs brushing over the cut on my cheek. His eyes were wild, broken, staring at me with an intensity that burned right through my skin. "I wasn't just talking about her," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I can't lose you again. I can't look at another operating table, Sunny. I can't do it." The world seemed to stop. The rain, the sirens wailing in the distance, Lily sobbing softly, it all faded into white noise. "I can't look at another operating table." My breath caught in my throat. I shoved him away, stumbling back a step. "You." Ethan's face went pale. He realized what he had just said. The mask he had worn for the last 12 years shattered completely. "Sunny." He started, stepping forward. "Don't," I gasped, holding up a hand. My chest was heaving. The phantom pain of a sterile hospital room, the blinding overhead lights, the cold metal instruments, it all rushed back, suffocating me. "Don't touch me." The police cars swarmed the shipyard, flashing red and blue lights, blinding us. Julian came running through the wet concrete, throwing his jacket over my freezing shoulders. I didn't look at Ethan for the rest of the night. After the incident at the shipyard, everything changed. The Whitman family was thrown into a legal and corporate war with the Vickers family, who had orchestrated the kidnapping to leverage Whitman Corp stocks. Ethan became a phantom in the house, ruthlessly tearing apart the Vickers empire piece by piece until they were nothing but bankrupt ruins. I accelerated my timeline. I graduated from Central High as valedictorian. The day I received my acceptance letter to Stanford, I packed my bags. Mrs. Whitman cried, holding my hands. "Sunny, why do you have to go so far? You can go to any school here. We can buy you a penthouse near the campus." "I need to do this on my own, Mom," I said gently. It was the first time I had called her mom in years. She had been good to me in this life. She didn't deserve my distance. "I'll visit. I promise." Lily hugged me, sobbing into my coat. "I'm going to miss you so much." Ethan stood by the grand staircase, his hands in his pockets. He looked older, tired, carrying the weight of a corporate empire and a secret we both refused to speak about. "I'll have a car take you to the airport," he said softly. "I'm driving myself," I replied. "Julian is outside." Ethan's jaw tightened at Julian's name, but he just nodded. "Be safe, Sunny." For the next 4 years, I barely looked back. California was exactly the fresh air I needed. Julian and I attended Stanford together. By our sophomore year, we had launched Apex Capital, a venture capital firm specializing in AI and green energy tech. With my knowledge of the future market and Julian's unmatched analytical skills, we didn't just succeed, we exploded. By the time I was 22, Apex Capital was worth over $300 million. I was featured in Forbes. I bought my own penthouse in San Francisco. I was no longer the orphan the Whitmans had taken in. I was Sunny, a titan in my own right. I stayed in touch with Lily, flying her out for weekends in Napa Valley. She was thriving, studying art history, free of the dark fate that had claimed her in the past. But I never saw Ethan. Not until the Whitman Gala. It was their 50th anniversary corporate banquet, held at a massive, glass-domed conservatory in New York. I received an invitation not as a family member, but as the CEO of Apex Capital. I arrived wearing a backless, emerald green silk gown. Julian walked beside me, wearing a sharp-tailored suit, looking every bit the devastatingly handsome tech billionaire he had become. We commanded the room the moment we walked in. I saw Mr. and Mrs. Whitman across the floor. They beamed with pride, rushing over to hug me. But my eyes inevitably found him. Ethan stood by the champagne tower. He was breathtakingly sharp in a black tuxedo, exuding the cold, untouchable aura of a man who ruled his world. But when his eyes locked onto mine, that coldness melted into something raw, desperate, and profoundly sad. He walked over to me, nodding politely to Julian before focusing entirely on me. "You look beautiful, Sunny," Ethan said, his voice a low rumble. "Can we talk? Alone?" I looked at Julian. He gave me a brief nod, squeezing my hand before stepping away to speak with some tech investors. Ethan led me up a spiral staircase to a private glass balcony overlooking the glittering skyline of Manhattan. The noise of the party faded away, leaving only the hum of the city below. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I've watched your company grow, Ethan finally said, leaning against the glass railing. I'm proud of you. You built an empire. I built it so I would never have to rely on anyone again, I said coldly. Especially not you. Ethan flinched. He looked down at his hands. I know. And you had every right. Did I? I stepped closer. The anger I had buried for over a decade finally bubbling to the surface. We've played this silent game for 7 years, Ethan. Ever since that night at the shipyard. You remember everything, don't you? You remember the past life. Ethan closed his eyes. Yes. Then tell me. My voice cracked, tears springing to my eyes despite my absolute resolve not to cry. Tell me why you told me to smile while people framed me. Tell me why you hated me. Tell me why you forced me onto that operating table to kill my baby. Because it was killing you. Ethan shouted, his eyes snapping open, blazing with unshed tears. The silence that followed was deafening. I stared at him, paralyzed. Ethan ran a trembling hand through his hair, his chest heaving as the truth he had carried across 2 lifetimes finally spilled over. You didn't know, Ethan whispered, his voice breaking. How could you know? You were so heavily sedated at the end. Lily didn't just die in an accident, Sunny. The Vickers family poisoned her. And when you tried to investigate it, when you got too close to the truth, they poisoned you too. The breath left my lungs. What? It was a slow-acting neurotoxin. Ethan continued, a tear slipping down his stoic face. By the time the doctors figured it out, it was too late. You were pregnant. The toxin concentrated in the fetus. The baby was dead, Sunny. It died in your womb weeks before you collapsed. And the necrotic tissue was sending you into septic shock. I gripped the glass railing, my knees suddenly weak. No, you said. I said I didn't want the baby, Ethan choked out, taking a step toward me, though he didn't dare touch me. I told you I hated you. I told you to smile, to be strong, to take the blame for everything, because I needed you to hate me. If you hated me, you would fight. You would have the will to live just to spite me. He dropped to his knees right there on the balcony, ruining his tailored trousers, his head bowed. The doctors said you had a 10% chance of surviving the surgery to remove the baby. My parents abandoned you. The board wanted you silenced. I had to play the villain to keep you in the hospital, to force the surgery under my authority. I took all your hatred, Sunny, because I loved you so much it felt like I was burning alive. Tears streamed down my face. I remembered the blinding lights of the operating room. I remembered Ethan standing in the doorway, his face a mask of absolute ice, telling the doctors to proceed. I hadn't seen the way his hands were, bleeding from where he had punched the wall outside. I hadn't known. You died on the table anyway, Ethan whispered to the floor, his shoulders shaking. My heart stopped the second your monitor flatlined. I spent the next 3 years destroying the Vickers family, destroying my own family, destroying myself. When I put a gun to my head and pulled the trigger, I prayed to whatever God would listen to let me fix it. He looked up at me, his eyes red and agonizingly vulnerable. When I woke up as a kid again, I swore I would change it all. I found Lily early so she wouldn't be murdered. I kept you at a distance so the Vickers would never see you as a target. I pushed you away so you could build your own life, safe from the rot of my family. Ethan gave a hollow, broken laugh. And you did. You built a beautiful life. One that doesn't need me. I stood there, the cool night air biting at my bare shoulders. The colossal weight of my past life, the hatred, the betrayal, the grief, suddenly unraveled, turning into dust and blowing away in the wind. He didn't kill our child. He had tried to save my life. I slowly sank to my knees, leveling myself with him. I reached out, my trembling fingers brushing away the tear on his cheek. Ethan leaned into my touch, closing his eyes as a ragged sob tore from his throat. You shouldn't have carried that alone, I whispered. In either life. I would carry it 1,000 times if it meant you got to live, he replied, fiercely, opening his eyes to look at me. I don't expect you to forgive me, Sunny. I don't expect you to love me. I just needed you to know. You were never unwanted. Never. I looked at Ethan, the boy who had been my tormentor, my savior, and the tragedy of my first life. The love I once had for him was still there, buried deep beneath years of scar tissue, but it was a ghost, a phantom of a life that no longer existed. I forgive you, Ethan, I said softly, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. I forgive you for the past, and I thank you for the present. Ethan exhaled, a sound of absolute, soul-deep relief. He nodded slowly. But I can't be with you, I said gently. Ethan's eyes shadowed, but he didn't protest. He just looked at me with infinite understanding. The girl who loved you died on that operating table. I explained, my voice steady, clear, and finally at peace. The woman sitting in front of you is someone else. She fought tooth and nail to build a world where she doesn't belong to the Whitmans. I can't go back to being that girl, Ethan. I can only go forward. Ethan reached out and gently took my hand. He brought my knuckles to his lips, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to my skin. It was a goodbye to a love that had spanned 2 lifetimes. Then go forward, Sonny, he whispered, a bittersweet smile touching his lips. Rule your world. And if you ever look back, know that I'll be watching your back. Always. I smiled. A real, brilliant smile. I know you will, Ethan. You're the best brother I could ever ask for. The word brother sealed our fate. It was the closing of a door, and the opening of a window. Ethan helped me to my feet, and for the first time in either of our lives, there was no tension between us. No secrets. Just peace. When I walked back down the spiral staircase, Julian was waiting by the champagne tower. He looked up, his sharp eyes scanning my face, looking for any sign of distress. When he saw me smiling, he relaxed, his posture shifting as he handed me a flute of sparkling cider. Everything all right? Julian asked, his voice low. Everything is perfect, I said, taking his arm. Let's go home, Julian. 5 years later, the sun was setting over the San Francisco Bay, casting a golden hue over the massive glass windows of the Apex Capital headquarters. I stood at the head of the boardroom table, signing the final pages of a multi-billion-dollar merger. The room erupted into applause. Julian, standing to my right, clinked his glass against mine. To Sonny, Julian said, grinning. The undisputed queen of Silicon Valley. To us, I corrected, smiling at my partner in business and in life. Julian and I had been married for 2 years. Our relationship wasn't born out of desperate trauma or life and death stakes. It was built on mutual respect, shared ambition, and quiet, enduring love. He was my equal in every way. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from Lily, accompanied by a picture of her holding a canvas covered in paint. Gallery opening next week. You better be there, or I'm telling Mom. I chuckled and typed back, I've already booked the private jet. See you soon. Squirt. A second text popped up, this one from Ethan. Congratulations on the merger. I read the terms. You fleeced them. I'm taking notes. I smiled softly, looking out at the glittering city below. I had been reborn into a nightmare, trapped in the shadow of a family that had once destroyed me. But I didn't let the past dictate my future. I didn't wait for a savior, and I didn't succumb to the hatred. I took the broken pieces of my first life and forged them into a crown. I took a deep breath of the cool California air, raised my glass to the setting sun, and finally truly smiled.